right, your adventure to Unity Land has to start somewhere. Let it begin here, right now. Go to unity.com, create an account, fill out all this wonderful information, and you'll get a Unity ID. Once you have a Unity ID, you can sign in. And then browse around the Unity site. Now, you're here for a particular reason. You want to get started with Unity. You can go and click the Get Started button. Select Student Hobbyist if you're a student in Hobbyist. Select Personal and click the Get Started button again. Pick your download, and if you're on Mac, it should say Mac. And when you download, you're going to install the hub. And the hub is where you install different versions of Unity and also where you build your projects. Install the hub, just click on the download and follow the instructions. Launch the hub, and when you launch the hub, you have access to making projects and also dealing with the installs. And they're constantly updating and rolling out, so keep on checking Unity's website to see what is the best version for you. Up here is your account information to get a new install. In case you have no installs here, click on this menu item, Installs. This is your project. These are your projects, and right now I have nothing. This is your installs. I have one install. Click on Install Editor. Choose a long-term supported release, LTS, when you're just starting out, or you've been using this for a while and you just want something that's going to work consistently. If you need some new feature that you read up online that one of the pre-releases, betas, have this cool feature you need to try out and you want something that only the new beta and you're willing to take a little risk, use a beta. Start out with a long-term release and click on Install. Pick what platform options you want to output. If you're starting out on the Windows side, select Universal Windows. This way you can make some AR, VR stuff. If you're going for Mac builds, why not do Mac? These other builds for your iOS and Android devices. iOS will require extra installs on your Mac and Android as well. So when you're just starting out and you just want to understand Unity better or you're building something for a desktop, pick a module such as this one and click on Install. Now, since I already have my install here, if I want to upgrade the modules associated with it, just click Add Modules and select what you want to add and then click on Install. Let's say I just want to add documentation. Click that, installs. Now on the right side, now that we're at modules, you can see how much space things take up, such as adding the Universal Windows platforms could take up 2 gigs, about 2 gigs. So install only what you need until you need it. As shown, you could always add things as you need it. If you want to uninstall one of these installations, just click on the gear and click on Uninstall. Jump to projects. Right now there's no projects here. Start a new project, click on New Project. Pick a project name off on the right side and going to call this Planet 07. Pick a location, select the folder. In this area, you'll select your project templates. If you're starting out and you want to just experiment with dragging objects in and playing with Unity's interface, start out with the 3D Core. The 3D Core is a solid way to get started with Unity. If you're looking for some interesting visual effects like depth of field, blooms, and other things, then the URP and HDRP are the right choices. The HDRP is going to look a lot more realistic, but the URP is going to run a lot quicker. URP can run on your cell phone if that's what you're looking for. If you're just looking to do some animation, either the URP or HDRP are excellent choices. And these are plain scenes. So if I click here, it'll show a preview up here of the type of scene that you're starting out with a brief description. If you want some samples in your scene just to play with, using the sample scenes, HDRP, or sample scenes, URP, the construction site, will give you something to rotate around, move around, maybe add on to the scene. Right now, I'm going to start out with a URP. And before I click Go, which is right here, Create Project, One note, you should get an external SSD drive. That's one of those solid state drives, not a mechanical drive, the old school ones with an actual disk in it that spins around. That's because Unity creates a lot of files, and not just a lot of files, little files, but it also creates gigs of information. When I click URP, it's going to create roughly 2 gigs of information to get this project started. And that will add up quickly each time you make a project and when you start to add assets into your project. So installing this on an external drive, excellent, but make sure it's an external SSD drive. This way everything flows quickly in and out of the computer. And you just don't want to clog up your internal drive with all these projects. 10 projects, that's 20 gigs gone instantly. Click on this. All right, after a minute or 2 or 3, you'll be within the Unity interface. Off on the left side is the hierarchy, which is a listing of all the objects in the scene and gives you a way to select your objects. Down here is the project area. Here's the assets area. These are the files that you would import or files that get created within Unity. They end up here as your assets library. And you would drag an asset from here or from here into the scene in order to use it. On the right side is the inspector, and the inspector gives you more information, ways to control and animate your objects within the scene and feedback. And it's also the place where after you select an object, you can add components, scripts onto your object, and you can make some adjustments to settings. We'll see about these adjustments as soon as we get an object into the scene to play with it. To get an object in the scene, you can drag it into here, or you can right-click, import new asset, or asset, import new asset. First thing I'm going to do is create an asset, and it's going to be the simplest asset possible, and then you can import things. And this way, you can build your scene. First thing to do is to save your scene. File, save as, and I'm going to call this scene Scene 1. Save. By saving the scene, it appears here. And to access that scene, which you're seeing right now, you would just double-click that asset to open it up. You could also go under File, Open Scene. If you want a new scene, File, New Scene, you can pick a template, hit Cancel, because one scene is enough to get started. First thing, create an object. Afterwards, you'll import an asset. Go to Game Object, 3D Object, and select Cube. Or you can right-click here, 3D Object, Cube. They both lead to the same place, a cube being created in the center of the scene. Zoom into this selected object, press Shift-F, and you'll zoom right in. To orbit the view, hold down the Option or Alt key and left mouse button. To orbit, to pan, Option or Alt key, middle mouse button will pan. And to zoom, Option or Alt key, left mouse button. This is the scene view. Right next to it is the game view. If you click on the camera, you'll see a preview of what that game experience would be like or your animation experience would be like. To set this to be this game view, select your camera, go to Game Object, Align with View. And now your game view is just like your scene view. You can still orbit around, and now you can see the camera is pointing at your object like this. So it's a convenient way to set up your camera. Just orbit around with your camera selected, Game Object, Align with View. Now that you have an object in the scene, to move it around, select the object and drag it on the arrowheads, the gizmo, to move it around. As you drag it around, if you look in the inspector, you can see the numbers are moving around. If you want it to move this to a particular place, like on one unit on the x-axis, just type in the number 1 there, and there's where it is. Now, after you move your object, let's say you rotate your object like this. After moving your object around and you want to remove all of its transformations, with the object selected, go right here to these 3 little dots and let me move my panel over. Click on the 3 dots and select Reset. And now your object is back to the way it was. In the hierarchy, you can select your object just like the camera was selected. And from there, you can click and rename it. You can also select it there and delete it. Okay, it's time to get some assets into here. One of the assets is going to be a model that you probably made in Maya or Blender. And if you did in Maya, you probably wired up all the Arnold shaders into it so it looks awesome when you render it with Arnold. However, by exporting it as an FBX file to get it into Unity or Unreal or even Blender or somewhere else, isn't perfect for exporting a shader like Arnold. And so the base color will be missing, and I'll go over how to retouch the base color. You'll still save a lot of time by wiring up your model within Maya and then just adding that one extra base map to each material here. To get an object in here, right-click, Import New Asset, or go to Assets, Import New Asset. I'm going to select the option where just click and drag into the assets area. Once your object's in here, you can inspect it by clicking on the object. Once you have your object imported, create a new folder by right-clicking Create Folder or going under Assets, Create Folder. Either one will get you a new folder. Name this folder after your asset, just to make it a little easier to spot. The iconology is an empty folder looks like this. See, it's small and outlined, while folders with things in it, such as dragging this ship into this folder, now changes the iconology on this folder to being filled in and bigger. Double-clicking that folder icon brings you into that folder. To get back out to the main folder of assets, just click the word assets. So double-click to get into that folder. Drag your asset into the hierarchy. You could also drag it into the scene and place it somewhere in the scene. I'm dragging it into the hierarchy. This way it places the asset at the center of the scene. In order to see your model, two things have to happen. Unpacking the textures and materials and also rewiring the base color onto this material. First step is to select your object, going under the inspector and under the materials right here. There's no animation on this model. There's no rig. Going right to materials, click on textures, extract textures. Pick a location within the assets folder. I can put them all into the ship folder. Instead, I'll just make a new folder and call it textures. This way the scene is kept organized. Select that folder and wait for those textures to be imported. Now at the end of this import process, there's one important step to do. And that's coming up in a few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there it goes. Well, your object doesn't look that good. Something happened. A window should have popped up, and that window's name is Normal Map Settings. Just click on Fix Now, and all the normal maps are fixed. Your object looks a lot better than it did a moment ago. Instead of that patchy, tiley look, it's still missing the base color, and that's the next part to get the base color onto this. I need to extract the materials, so this way in the scene are the materials that then you can connect textures into. Only the base color needs to be connected. With this selected, with your object selected within the assets area, click on Extract Materials, make a new folder, and you can call it Materials. Select Folder, go to Materials folder, and when you click on a material, all of its properties, surface inputs, are off in the inspector. These inputs have already been connected to textures that are within the Textures folder, within here. So the Materials, clicking on one. The Normal has a map connected to it, Roughness has a map, and so does Metalness. Base color is missing a map, and that's what has to happen next. You have to rewire in the base color. Go into the main ship folder, which is Assets Ship, making yet another folder. Create, right-click, Create Folder, calling it Base Color. Double-click in there. I had gathered all my materials neatly within my Maya project, or it could have been your Blender project. As you work, you make nice, neat folders. From this folder, I need to copy all the base colors into here, then reconnect it. I'm going to fast forward through this. Now that you have all the base colors in here, and there's quite a few that have to be connected, click on your object and scroll on down to one of the materials. I'm going to select the main one right here, and if you just click on it, it expands all those connections. There's two ways to attach a material. One is by clicking this button, and the select textures window shows up, and then you would scroll on through and find the correct texture to attach like that and connect it that way. Also, to undo a connection, you would just click that same button and select none up here. So that was one way to connect a texture. The other way is to go to your missing textures, click on your object to again get into focus, scroll on down to that shader. You could just click to open it up if it's not open. Locate the missing texture in here and then click and drag it to that swatch area. You don't see any change, and that's because the base color has to be changed from black all the way up to white. And now you see your texture on your object. The next step is to repeat this for all the missing base color materials on your object. Clicking on your object, and this time I'm going to lock this window. By locking it, if you click off on anything, you still are focused in on the inspector. And by not losing focus, it's going to make this process a little bit quicker. Going in order, I'm going to the ship window and just dragging here, clicking on that base color swatch and increasing it to white. Let me do the next one. Going to the next material, and if it's not expanded, click on Surface Input. Find the name of the missing texture, ship mouth in this case. Clicking here, ship mouth, dragging this material from here and dropping it into the swatch, changing the color from black to white. And just work the way down the list. Each model will have a different list depending upon how you wired it. And if you don't see your inputs, all you have to do after you click on the material is open up, expand the surface input, find that material, and drag it and change it. Okay, you wired up everything. Well, not everything. When I clicked on the ship, it didn't select these child objects here and here. The next step is to click on each one of those objects and follow the same process for wiring things up. Or the other approach would be to go to the materials folder and just pick the material. There's not so many of them. Since the majority of the materials had the base color added to it, which is clicking on that select button, finding within here, you can type in the word hatch, and only a few hatches show up. Everything that's being wired in is the base color, so selecting one with color on it, making sure it's the right one. Hatch 1 is the same as hatch 1, which is the same as hatch 1 here. And if that's all okay, you just increase the color. The hatch was down here, by the way. I'll do that with the next hatch, the hatch pipe. Zooming in using the wheel on the wheelie mouse. You could also use the left mouse button and the Option or Alt key to zoom in and zoom out. This is the next part that's going to be wired in. Selecting the hatch pipe, clicking on Select, searching for hatch again. We already used hatch 1, hatch pipe, and just checking to make sure that's the correct one. It is. Double click and change the color to white. And there it is. And that's it. You're all done. Make sure to save your file because it did take some time to link everything up again. What's up next is animating, and you could build a very elaborate scene and import characters. First, let's see how to render out this image. And if we can render out this image, we can add animation to this scene, and then we could import a character and make a little scene out of this. To add this functionality to your project, and you have to do it per project, you need to add a new package and understand what a package is a little bit. Package is a grouping of functionality that you could import into a project so you could do more with that project. One thing that you want to do would be to render out a still image or a whole animation. Go to Window, Package Manager. And here's your package manager. Go to Unity, select Unity registry packages, and we're about to do a search for the package, the recorder. To get the recorder going, you've selected the Unity registry, and you would type in the search field, record, and you'll come up with recorder. To get it into your project, click on install. To remove any package, you would come back here, select that package, and click on remove. I don't want to remove it. I want to render a single frame and then animate this object and then render out an animation. Click and close the package window. To take a snapshot of this object, what you want to do is go to your camera and align your camera to this view. Because select your camera, go to Game Object, align with View. Now, if you're not seeing your object, selecting the camera, and under its inspector for clipping plane near, set that down to 0. And it's not going to stay at 0. It'll go to some small percent, and now you can see it. If this is a shot you want, and you select the camera and go to Game Object, align with View, and you see it here. Now, the clipping plane, though, with this camera selected, if you increase the clipping plane to, let's say, 0.3, you can see the object disappears from here. And that's because the clipping plane is clipping away the object. There it is. This is the view that will be rendered out. Go to the Game tab. You have different settings under the Game tab. Right now, my ratio, my scale is a little bigger. I'm setting my scale down here. Instead of free aspect ratio, you can select a 16:9 aspect ratio or full HD. Using the scroll wheel, you could zoom in and zoom out. To get this recorded, to get a snapshot, of course, you could take a screenshot of this. The goal, though, is to create a whole animation. To do this, go to Window, General, and move on down to Recorder. Open up the Recorder window. To start the process of recording, whether it's going to be a single image or animation, click on Add Recorder and select what type of recording do you want. Animation clip, movie, image sequence. I'm going to select an image sequence, even though I just want one image. Image sequence. Capture what? Use the game view. Output size, match what's in the window size, the game view, or select a different format size. I'm going to match the game view. Media file type. The output type will be a PNG file. What's going to be the name of this file? Image underscore the take and which frame number. I think that's an okay name. I might call mine after the object, so it's easy to recognize. It's going to be saved here. You could change the location by clicking the recording location and picking a new folder. I think where it's going to save it, the recordings directory, is a great place. And this could be take number 1. Right before I hit this big red button that will start the recording, there's a few other settings up here that are important. Playback speed, constant or variable. I use a constant playback speed, so everything's even. You can select the target frame rate. You want to do something at 60 frames per second. I'm going to leave it at 30 frames per second. And cap the frame rate so it doesn't go faster than 30 frames per second. Under record mode, instead of manual where you're clicking to begin and end, you could select single frame, which is something I'm interested in doing, frame interval, or a time interval, starting at 1 second going to 2 seconds, or starting at 0 seconds and going 10 seconds. I'm going to select single frame because that's why I was here. Later on, using a frame interval or a time interval, we'll get an animation sequence. The last step is to click this red button. And that's it. The one image has been created. Going to your project folder, wherever you have it on your hard drive in that particular project, going to recordings, and here's an image that was recorded. There's still a lot more to understand within the game engine, adjusting lights, adjusting special effects, doing animation, changing the background, or knocking out this background totally. However, you have successfully rendered a single image out of the game engine. If you could do one image, you could do multiple images. This is a great start to recording animation in Unity. Jumping back to some special effects, if you go under the global volume right here, you can see there's a few check marks underneath the volume. And tonal map, is the look. Checking on and off. Bloom. So look at the highlights right here with it on and off. And I'm in the game view to preview this. And vignette, which is the edges. Expanding the bloom like this, you can increase the intensity, and you can either type a number, or as an interface, if you see the double arrows, you just click and drag. You can increase the bloom a lot or decrease it. You can also add other special effects here. Before I do that, I'm going to set the bloom intensity back a little lower, let's say to 5. You can also pick the color for it by clicking on tint and then clicking the swatch. Maybe you want it to be bluish like this, so it's cool, or you want it to warm up, selecting red. I think I'll leave it warm. To add a new effect, click on Add Override. From Post-Processing, you could click various things. Experiment, you could see that they're not that hard. I'll show you how to add and take it away. The next one I'm going to add is Depth of Field, right there. It's turned on already. Click on Mode. Click on Mode, and I'm going to choose, let's try Gaussian. And you can have a start point and an end point. Drag. I'm going to choose bokeh, and from here you can choose focus distance, decreasing the focus distance or increasing the focus distance. If you increase it, you can decrease the focus distance and decrease the focal length. To adjust the depth of field. So have a lot of fun with this one. To remove any of these, click on the triple dots right over there and select Remove from the menu. And it's gone. Now that you know how to render, it's time to create that animation. Go fold this ship up, and this ship is this whole object. So whatever object you have, right click here and create a new game object. And that game object, it's going to be the main timeline. It's an empty element. Nothing's in it. We're going to attach animation into this timeline to animate this object or other objects that might show up in this scene. After creating this empty game object, go right here all the way to the left side and select Reset. Select Reset. That zeroes out all the transformations of the object. Select the object in the hierarchy and go under Window, Sequencing, Timeline. This is a timeline editor. Take it and just drag it down or place it wherever you want. Expanding it a little bigger. And to expand a window, wait until you see the double arrows and click and drag up and down. Click on Create to create a new timeline, and this is going to be the main timeline, which currently says Main Timeline. Save. Go to the upper right-hand corner of the timeline panel and just click on the lock so this way it doesn't lose focus. A simple animation can be created in just maybe a bobbing and a turning of this object. Click and drag this object from the hierarchy and drag it down here into the left side of the timeline and release. From there, select Add Animation Track. When you release it, this window will pop up, this little panel. Select Add Animation Track. And we're almost ready to animate. This is your timeline. To pan your timeline, hold down the Option and middle mouse button. Here's the number of frames, starting at 0, 60, which represents 2 seconds of animation. If you want to jump there, not 60, 59, just typing in 60 will jump you there. To start animation, maybe the ship just comes closer from further away. Select your ship object right here, and you can navigate in the viewport and just push it on back. We'll adjust the camera right after this. Click on Start Recording there. And when you start recording, you'll see this red line pop up. To make your first keyframe, just move on over and just move your object a little bit to start recording. And you'll see now in the inspector, all these fields are red to represent a key being recorded. Go to 3 seconds later, which is 90. How about 5 seconds later, which is 150 frames? Type in 150 and press enter. Drag this object forward. The key is automatically recorded. Now you can stop recording. To scrub your timeline, just click and drag like this. If you want to change the animation, maybe this object goes up a little bit at frame 60. Type in 60 and press record. Drag the object up. You have it doing this little bounce upward. Stop recording. To play the animation, besides dragging the timeline line like this, just click the play button. And there's the moment of animation. Also, you could go to the game view here and click on play. Going back to the scene view, we still have the camera to adjust and a few other things. Let's take a look at this in the game view again and dragging the timeline in the game view. One thing to adjust might be the camera. Taking a look at the camera, selecting the camera, going under the inspector, and you can choose field of view. If you want to have wide angle like this, you could type in 100, you could type in 55. Also, you might notice a little distortion going on. If you click on physical camera, that will get rid of that type of distortion. Going back to the scene, and let's take a look at this from a camera point of view. To do that, realign up your viewport, and if I need my object to kind of flow a little further down, let me turn on recording for a moment again. Make sure you're exactly out of key, and just move that object off screen like this. That will be the shot. As this happens, maybe you want to animate the camera slowly moving. First, make sure the camera is lined up with this view by selecting the camera, going to Game Object, and go to Align with View. This frame will show you what the camera is seeing. Now that we got a ship animating, let's animate the camera and then render all this out. Go back to your scene and, just like with the other object, just drag the camera down into this area and select Add Animation. Click on the camera to see the preview and also to make it in focus right here. Click on Record at frame 0. Move the camera a little bit. You can scroll on out because the real preview of the camera is here. This is just a scene view. Click on the red axis, in my case, and just move it a little bit just to get the camera's key recorded. Wait until the ship shows up and wiggle it again. So we have this position of the camera right here. And then by frame 150, you can have the camera follow the ship by just clicking and dragging until it's barely in view. Let me pull it a little bit further this way so it just left the scene. Scrub your timeline, see if that's something you like. And there's an animation. And click on Stop Recording. To start your recording, it could be in the scene view or game view, doesn't matter. Go to Window, General, and go on down to Recorder, Recorder Window. This could be take number 2. If you had no takes before, you would click here over the word Add Recorder and pick the type of animation. It could be image sequence. I'm going to uncheck the previous one, and you could also just click on it and delete it. Setting up this image sequence, playback, constant speed, target frames per second, 30 frames per second, cap the max speed at 30 frames per second. Source will be the game view. Output will match the window size, or you could pick a different size. Media type will be a sequence of PNG files. The image name, I'm going to call this Ship Animation. Where to store the ship animation, it's going to be stored here. And then go up here. Before you hit record, This won't be a single frame. This will be a frame interval. Starting at frame 0 and going to frame 150. And to record the animation, click the red button. The frames are being processed, not real time, but it's a heck of a lot quicker than rendering in Arnold in Maya or other high-end renderers. And that's it. The last part is to put all these images together into an animation. Convert all those frames that were just rendered out from Unity into a video clip. Open up Premiere, After Effects, or whatever application you enjoy. And it's usually the same process. File, import, and in After Effects, select File, individual file. Select the first image in the sequence. This was a still, not that one, this one. Make sure PNG sequence is checked. Same thing in Premiere, and you'll see that in other applications as well. Click on Import, and everything gets imported as a clip. All you have to do in After Effects, drag that clip down here. And this is your timeline. Press the space bar to preview it. If I want to clip the clip right here, end it right there, press the N key to trim the workspace to this end. And now you can view your animation over and over again. To export this, go to File, Export, and add to Media Encoder. Wait for it to show up in Media Encoder. Select your outputs, and H.264 is the output for this to make an MP4 file. Click on a location to save this. And click the green button to render. When it's all done, find it on your hard drive, Media Encoder, just click that link, and preview your video.